Shalom, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, and welcome to Faith to Faith. No matter what our differences may be, it is our faith that hopefully brings us together to do great things. The Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations is the unified voice of organized American Jewry. Represented are 51 national Jewish organizations from across the political and religious spectrum, providing a forum for deliberations of American Jewish leadership and a central address for key American, Israeli, and other world leaders to consult on issues of critical concern to the Jewish community. My guest today is Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of major American organizations. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Good to be with you.
Nice to have you in many ways because I cherish our friendship over the years. You're a person I've turned to many times for guidance. How is it possible for one person like you to keep 51 national Jewish organizations in the arena, talking to each other, disagreeing with each other, and somehow coming out with a statement of support for an issue?
Well, sometimes I say I give them a common enemy, me. But the truth is that I believe sincerely and spent my whole career working in umbrella organizations because I believe in the theme of that through unity comes strength, that the one precondition to every great thing that happened to the Jewish people throughout our history was Achdus, unity. From we stood at Mount Sinai as one person with one heart to the rescue of Russian Jews and Ethiopian Jews and Syrian Jews and Iranian Jews and Yemeni Jews. It was only when we put aside our differences and recognized that what we have in common far outweighs our differences. And maybe if 70 years ago we had been more united, maybe in other times we would have had better solutions than what occurred. But we saw it in the Soviet Jewry movement, and you were an integral part of that. And when I came to New York and I saw how much the divisiveness dominated, and we were able over a period of time to create the Solidarity Days when eventually every segment of the community came together. And the result is very clear. And I think the same thing is true in regard to many other issues. It doesn't mean you can always find a solution. But when you can show people that the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts, and that it works, and that we can find out. The emphasis always in media and every result is on our differences. When we focus on what we have in common, then all of a sudden the differences can be put in the proper perspective.
You know, speaking of perspective, as a rabbi in California, David Wolpe, who I know you know, he said that you look at the spirit of disagreement, but if you really look closely, it's predicated on love. Because if you don't love one another, you're not passionate about one another. And the reason people take these strong stands is because they care about the Jewish people. It's not always pleasant to hear. It's not always the kind of dialogue we'd like to see. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's because I'm committed to your survival as you are committed to mine. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to each other.
The Hebrew word is arevut, is responsibility for one another, but it's really much more than that. And often others create conspiracy theories because they say, why would you march for Jews you don't know, you don't speak the same language, they live thousands of miles away. There's got to be something else here because others don't do it. We see the massacre now of Christians by the thousands, 8,000 to 10,000 a year, from Indonesia to Nigeria to Iran, Iraq, and the world ignores it, is silent. We speak out about it. Now we're working with the Yazidis in Iraq. We're working with refugees in Syria. Because I can't sit by silently. If never again means something, then it means that we stand up for whenever anybody is persecuted, because ultimately all of us will be victims.
Malcolm, explain this to me. Christians are being slaughtered, all right? And yet so little is said. And I think if Jews didn't speak out, probably nothing would be said. Where's everybody on this?
I tell you the truth, it's one of the great enigmas for me right now. And I've appealed to Christians. We turn to them, and they are often shocked by getting the facts about what is happening. But now they know, they've seen what ISIS has done, beheading people, taking thousands into captivity, what they're doing in Syria, what they're doing in other parts of Nigeria, these Boko Haram, taking these schoolgirls, and no United Nations resolutions, no Human Rights Council's meetings, yet they have time to spend 50% of their resolutions, everything condemning Israel, the one democracy in the Middle East, the one place where the Christian community in the Middle East has grown over the last 40 years, the only place where it has grown and where they have equal rights. And yet we see this persecution going virtually unchallenged. It is not explicable.
You know, Consul General of Israel in New York, Aroni, said recently, Some people look at the disagreement between Jews and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians, as 67. He said, I think it's sometimes about 48, about our very existence.
What it's about.
Right? And when you look at what goes on today, we'll talk about the tragedy, the most recent tragedy in Israel. There is this unwillingness to accept the other. The dislike of the unlike has gone so far. Can't live with Jews, can't live with Christians.
Even other Muslims.
There are other Muslims. It's an ideology that seeks to destroy. There is no compromise. What's interesting, Malcolm, I'm sure you've seen this, they're very clear about what they believe. You know, we like to contextualize, right? We like to say, well, they really mean this. They don't. This is what Mein Kampf was very clear.
Stalin was very clear. Hitler was very clear. Dictators tell the truth. Leaders of democracy sometimes lie, but dictators they'll tell you what they're going to do. Khamenei is telling us exactly what he wants to do. He wants to dominate the Middle East. He wants to eliminate Israel. He wants to eliminate the United States. In fact, now puts the United States, the quote, crusaders first. ISIS says very clearly what their intentions are, and it includes other Muslims who do not agree. If you don't understand the conflict in the Middle East today as being between Sunnis and Shiites, and not the things that people overlay, calling it an Arab Spring, it's an Arab volcano, and it's going to continue to erupt for a long time. And the problem is that the West tries to see things through their eyes, not the eyes of the people there. You don't understand the culture. You don't go to the tribes and try to build them up and who can exercise control, but bring in our troops, bring in outsiders who they will reject all the time. ISIS is smart. They buy off the tribal leaders. They take areas, but they tell us everything they're going to do. Yemen fell to Iran through the Houthis in Iran in the last month. They told us they're going to do it. They pronounced it. And the West sat back, and now this geopolitically strategic location fell.
How angry do you get when you hear people take this position? If only we would solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, everything else would fall into place. And you mentioned all of these battles going on everywhere, and I think to myself, wait a minute. It's got nothing to do with the Israelis and the Palestinians. Why do people look through that lens? I mean, it's delusional.
We've even had leaders of our own country who have said it, who do not say it anymore. I remember recently President Obama gave a speech in which he said that saying that everything contingent, that this is the priority, it's wrong. And it is wrong, because this becomes an excuse. No Arab leader that I meet, and I meet many of them, today even raises the issue. It's an annoyance to them. But they talk about the corruption in the Palestinian Authority, how they've given them hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, and it never gets to the people, and how they exploit the position, and how they had opportunities for peace that they didn't take. And they are, as you know, warming up to Israel in ways that we hadn't seen in a long time. You see this coalition of those threatened by Iran who look to Israel for leadership. And they found that Israel's the source of stability, not instability in the region. Doesn't mean that they've come to love Israel or they're not Zionists today, but there is a change, and it is an important change. It gets very little notice. This automatic formula is really the reverse. They said if you deal with the Palestinian Authority, you can deal with Iran then. No, you deal with Iran. You bring Iran back from being the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the region and around the world, from the threat of a nuclear Iran, et cetera. Then you can change the whole Middle East, because Syria won't be Syria. Assad won't be in power. Iraq won't be Iraq. The Shiite troops there will not, without Iranian support, won't do it. Yemen will not fall. You go across the region. If you take away the Iranian component, I think real peace is possible.
Now, you've convinced me, and I was convinced before, how do we convince everybody else? It's remarkable to me how people refuse to recognize the reality of the day.
But you know that polls show that the American people really get it, despite the distortions often in the media and the misrepresentations. They support Israel by overwhelming numbers. They understand the threat posed by Iran. They have become gun shy, and I frankly share the view. I don't want to see American military committed. But you know what the problem is? We always end up committing our military because we don't take the prophylactic steps early on that could prevent that. The only way you don't have to use the military is if Iran believes that the military option is real. If they don't believe it's real, it's going to inevitably lead to it. We could have stopped Saddam Hussein in the early 90s. We could have done many things to stop the Islamists early on, but we didn't, and we always wait then till there's a crisis. We tend to react rather than be proactive, anticipating problems and working with the people in the region. During the Iraq War, one of the leading officials called me in arranged to meet us 5:30 in the morning when he got away from he was jogging and he got away from his thing. And he said to us, listen guys, tell the people in Washington, I'm a local sheikh, deal with me. I know who belongs and who doesn't belong. You bring in people from outside, I'll assure you they'll never succeed. So part of the problem is that we don't understand the full context of the challenges we are facing, the parties that are engaged in it. You know, people think Syria is Assad versus the rebels. Syria is 7, 8 wars going on simultaneously. You know, it's the Kurds today, it's the Christians and the certainly Sunni Shiite and Alawites, and often these are failed states, like Libya. Libya has 147 tribes. It wasn't a country. The European colonialists imposed a country there on Syria and other places. So as opposed to, let's say, Egypt, which has a real national identity. They know they're Egyptians. That's why the army could be a unifying factor, despite the internal problems that are very real and remain. So there are a lot of factors, the economic factors. You know, 50% of the people in Egypt make less than $2 a day. Unemployment in most of these countries is 30, 40, 50%. If you don't understand the real factors and not put on this overcoat of, oh, it's for democracy and it's, yeah, do they want rights? They want the rights, but that's not what's driving them. It's empty stomachs. It's the inability to feed their families. It's the revolution information that enabled them to bypass the restrictions. It's the Sunni Shiite war. It's failed states. Those are the real factors.
Looking at Iran now, do you see this kind of zealous drive to have some agreement with Iran that would put Iran in a stronger position? I mean, there's all this talk about the nuclear capabilities, but many of us are concerned that what's happening with Washington negotiations, it's like a deal almost at any price. We'll give in a little bit more, and then you're left with this great threat. Do you see that happening?
I see it as an option for what's happening, although we've been repeatedly assured that's not the case, and they say no deal is better than a bad deal. But I heard the German foreign minister in Israel just a couple of days ago saying, well, we will get a reasonable deal. That's already worrisome. Reasonable is not absolute. We've been told there will be no way that they will have a nuclear weapon. Now we negotiate over the breakout time. Once you do that, you've lost, because the Iranians are not going to let you have full inspection. They're not going to be honest. They're not going to keep to it. And we are negotiating from Western eyes, and these guys who have been traders and things for 2,000 years are so much smarter. They know how to run around. They can say anything they want because they're not held to account for what they say. And all along, they have improved their nuclear program while we're sitting here for 10 years negotiating.
And they sense, the Iranians sense, a kind of American weakness here. They can
probe
smell
for
it,
it all
right?
the time, and they say, Khomeini said this, Osama bin Laden, they all use the same word. The West lacks will and determination. They're convinced that if they can wait them out, they are hurting. Price of oil dropping has hurt them immensely. So we have more leverage, not less, because of it. And if we don't exercise that leverage, then you know for sure that we're going to face a situation. And when you think of this barbaric regime, which executes one person every 8 hours, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, that we know of, political opponents, gays, priests, ministers, anybody, and Muslims who don't follow their line of Islam. Just think if they had a nuclear weapon on top of that. With the intimidation, they wouldn't have to use it. And every other country will seek a nuclear weapon because nobody's going to be left to their mercy. And you have the divisions that we see today, and this Sunni Shiite divide will get much worse. And if we don't come clear to the Iranians and say, this is the bottom line. You don't want it, we're going to show you what sanctions can really do. Congress is there. And the administration has asked them to hold off and said they don't want them to do it yet. But you have a new Congress in January. And that will not be a Congress that will be assuaged by, papered agreements that aren't real.
I worry sometimes about some of our religious leaders of all different faiths because I find a tendency to romanticize, tendency to say, look, we have to welcome the enemy, sit down, and somehow by having some kind of coffee and strudel, we're gonna change the person. I've seen receptions given for Iranian leaders, and you say, my God, you wouldn't welcome the Ku Klux Klan in this fashion. You wouldn't welcome other murderers, and yet they're treated as royalty by some.
And you know, some of them, I know the foreign minister very well, Zarif. He's a chameleon. He'll say or do whatever, and it serves the purpose. And lying is considered a positive attribute to achieve your ends. And there's a long history of that. So you're absolutely right. There is this desire, and Westerners, Americans, we all want to reach out. I speak to the people in Iran on a regular basis. I'm in touch with them since we worked on the Iran 13 case. But I speak to Muslims, I speak to Azeris and Baluchis and others, and you hear what the real story is inside, not the one we see. The people in Iran do not want this regime. They want their rights. The kids go in blue jeans, though they get arrested. They hold these demonstrations on campuses, and the West abandoned them. They were demonstrating, putting their lives on the line, and we said we don't get involved in family feuds. When the Green Revolution, our Secretary of State, like others, just said, no, we're not going to, this is not our business, you do it. And the people said, we're putting our lives on the line and the West can't even stand with us, doesn't show support. We undermined the chance for a peaceful change that would not involve us, but let the people have control. And it adds to the frustration when you realize that there were possibilities, there are possibilities.
Syrian moderates said the same thing. I know you read the papers
Rarely.
voluminously, yeah. Or you maybe avoid certain papers.
You know what Mark Twain said, if you don't read a paper, you're ill-informed. If you read one, you're misinformed.
So this concept of moral equivalence, you see the violence in Israel, you see this horrific attack, Jews praying in a synagogue. You know, you walk by a house of worship, it says, my house should be a house of prayer for all people. Obviously some people don't accept those words of Isaiah, but moral equivalence, all of a sudden you hear of a cycle of violence. So what do you mean a cycle of violence? Someone came in, perpetrated this horror, and now we're putting it in this general container, or this, you know, we're putting everything together.
Context,
yeah.
It really, yes, if you think that's certainly one of the things that, again, and we undermine not only Western values, Western interests, we undermine vital concerns because the terrorists feed on this, on their expectation that that's how we will behave and what we will do. And when you look at this particular attack, I already heard people saying, well, and I attended one of the funerals, that I heard people saying, well, this was a response for the lynching of a bus driver. When the autopsy, the police investigation, even the doctor is appointed by the family participated in the autopsy, came out and said clearly there's no sign of any violence, anything. The guy hung himself. Okay, it's sad, but it happened. Then they draw equivalents. I heard them saying, well, you know, why are restrictions on Muslims going up to the Temple Mount? There's no restrictions. They can go. There's restrictions on Jews. Jews can't go there to pray. And this is our holiest site. It's not the holiest site of the Muslims. It's sacred to them. They should have the rights, and I believe in religious freedom for all. But everybody buys into these distortions and misrepresentations, and then we equate the firefighter and the arsonist. Yeah. And we say, well, they're both equal. A country defending itself from 10,000 rockets, and terrorists who hide behind civilian populations to shoot rockets at civilians. They're all the same. And when you respond to protect your citizens, you're condemned and you're subjected to all these international panels of inquiry. What are they going to find? They'll find out that Israel defended itself and used limited means against an enemy that was deeply entrenched, armed to the teeth, had tunnels going into the country to carry out terror attacks. What would we do if we had that?
You know, you and I were involved with the discussion of the opera called infamously The Death of Klinghoffer. And you look at the title and you look at the opera, you say, my God, we're glorifying terrorists. We're giving them this human-like quality, and yet we wouldn't do it, as I said, with the Klan. We wouldn't do it with, you know, rapists. But yet when it comes to Jews, there's a different standard that's being applied. And what becomes even more frustrating is that you look at some of the Jews who are behind in promoting this kind of thinking.
And who try to justify it based on liberal principles or other freedom of speech. There's no freedom of speech to distort the events and to glorify terrorists. And I hope that the members of the Met will now review this and see the decision-making process, the people responsible, to say, what an outrage. You know, I'm not saying we should disrupt it, and I'm saying it's over, and I don't think it was a great success. And the reviews, I think, made clear, became more heightened interest because of the publicity. But there is a fundamental principle here. And once you dumb down the values, Pat Moynihan used to talk about that all the time. And exactly what he said is happening. Look at what is the major recruitment tool in the world today for terrorist organizations. Beheading. ISIS beheads dozens of people, leaves bodies along the road in Iraq, and 1,000 people a month sign up. But people from the States, from Canada, from Europe, thousands of them. They got maybe 20,000 or plus recruiters. So in Yemen, they start beheading. In Lebanon, they start beheading. Hezbollah started beheading people. They didn't do it before because it became a standard that this horrific act, you know, shooting somebody, at least there's some distance. This, you have to go out and literally cut off somebody's head. It's such a horrific act. I get chills. I can't even believe how somebody can do it. But it becomes a recruitment tool for young teenagers today. What have we done? How have we destroyed all the Judeo-Christian values, Muslim values, anything that any religion of decency should preach?
Why aren't there marches on campuses? I see all these people getting involved with BDS, boycott, sanctions, divestment, and yet when it comes to beheadings, it comes to people killed in a synagogue, I don't see demonstrations.
Iran executing people? No, but demonstrations that Iran should have a nuclear weapon and demonstrations that you should have boycotts of Israel. For what? What did Israel do? Give freedom and democracy to people, take in people from all over the world who are persecuted, who protects Christians. I met with Arab Israelis just in the last few days. And it is really a remarkable story. You know, you hear the criticism, but all that the government and the people are doing, all the projects, all the advancement of Muslim women in Israel, Arab women in Israel, see the progress in terms of investment in communities. Is there more to be done? Yes. But the story is really so different than what one would glean from the media. And yet they talk about boycotting Israel. And when they boycott a company like SodaStream, they're putting out of work hundreds of Palestinians who work in those things, and Israeli Arabs, in addition to Jews. And it is, to me, the height of immorality when they justify it, when you have taking, what do they call it, shelving, deshelving, when they go into stores and take out products. They're actually taking out kosher products, not Israeli products. And now the unilateral moves by some of the European governments to recognize a Palestinian state. Do you understand what it means? It means that you kill negotiations. Because why should Abbas negotiate if he thinks he'll get it on a silver platter? He's the one who gave up on on the Omer plan, the plan submitted by Barak, the Annapolis negotiations, so many things. But the world always says, oh, Israel's the obstacle. Israel agreed each time. They rejected it each time.
Malcolm, let's talk about you. I saw a film of you years ago. No, you look pretty good in those years. I don't want to say you look the same today as you look then, because you know people say I look that old then.
No, you know the stage of life. You're looking good.
But there you were speaking about Soviet Jewry. How is it for you today when you meet Natan Sharansky? There you were protesting for him, right? Here you are embracing him. It's got to be in your resume a great, great accomplishment that that cause you saw a dream fulfilled for so many.
I will tell you that there's no greater reward. People have often asked me, you know, why they knew I had job offers from many places that were far more lucrative than staying in Jewish life. But there's nothing more rewarding. Like you, who I know have a law degree of other things that you could have done, the truth is that there's nothing more rewarding than being able to look back and say you made a difference. How many people really make a difference in where it counts? And that means in improving people's lives. That we helped get Syrian Jews out, that we helped get Ethiopian Jews out, that we helped with Iraqi Jews, we helped with Iranian Jews, we helped with Yemeni Jews, we helped with others, that we spoke up for Christians, that we in fact, in some cases, were able to bring them out of those countries too, Iran, for example. There's no greater reward. When you die, nothing goes with you except the legacy you left, what you did for your family, for your friends, for the community, for the country, for the world. Did you make a difference? Did you change things? Did you improve people's lives? And that's you know, I work 18-hour days still. People think, you know, that I'm nuts for all that I do. But I love it because I know I'm making a difference. Believe me, it's not easy, as you know.
You know, the biographer of the Duke of Wellington, before he wrote the biography, said to the Duke, let me see your checkbook. I said, what do you mean my checkbook? Why is that your business? He said, because if I'm going to write that you were charitable, if I'm going to write that you were giving, I want to see the receipts. I want to see the canceled checks. And I just want to say, looking at your life, and there's more ahead, obviously, you have a lot of receipts. You've done so much for so many. I think there are many people, and I've been with you when the Prime Minister of Israel has acknowledged you. People say, thank God there's a Malcolm Hoenlein. Thank God there's someone who's a proud Jew, who's not afraid to say what needs to be said. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be your friend.
It's an honor to have you as a partner and even more as a friend. It goes back decades already that we've worked together, and that you care and share the same values and motivations that I do really links us from the heart.
Remember, we have different faiths, we may have different faces, but above all, we must see each other as members of one human family. A great Jewish sage said, if you believe it can be broken, then know it can also be fixed. When we speak faith to faith, we know we can find the right way to fix the problems of our world. Thank you for watching Faith to Faith, the place that leads to greater understanding. Thank you to B'nai Zion for hosting JBS and Faith to Faith. The New York Board of Rabbis would also like to thank Marilyn and Marty Metz for their generous support. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik. Thank you for watching Faith to Faith on JBS.
Shoimer